Are you focused on what happens after the deal is done? You should be. I'll tell you more. Stay right where you are. Hey, welcome. I'm Susie. I'm so glad you made the choice to be here today. The best part of a negotiation is what happens after. And it's all about the relationship. That's what it's all about. And it's so obvious, but it gives so much power when you really focus on what is the long game. What is the whole point? It's not the short game. I have certainly seen people fighting to the bitter end to get what they want and really digging their heels in. And what happens is so often that if you focus on the short gain, the long-term relationship is going to really dwindle and there's going to be a lot of resentment. So it's important to think about what is next. That relationship is paramount. When I think about the evolution of negotiation, in the 70s when negotiation really started to be a strategy that was talked about by law school students when they were talking about the win-lose and how important it was to get the edge, to really think about it. And that's really where negotiation started when you think about the legal aspect of the business. And then in the 80s, it started coming up in business schools and it started recognizing, realizing that win-win. And you heard that talked about more because that was really what it was all about is in a business negotiation. Yes, you have the legal components that go with it. And it's important that you make sure that everything's ticked and tied and you have all of the right things in place. But I remember when I was working in an executive role and we were doing contracts that were long term, my boss's boss used to always tell me at the end of the day, people, hopefully, you don't even have to look back on the contract because that's only when things go wrong. It's all about the relationship. So the contract is really the safety net in case things go bad, technology fails, the relationship does go wrong and you're left, with something that you thought you had agreed on, but the other person walks away. That's why there's contracts. But really, his message to me was don't manage the clients based on the contract. File the contract away and manage the relationship ongoing because I was responsible for that as well. Manage the relationship, keep them happy, be thoughtful around how do you continue to deliver. That's what's really important is being relationship based. And that starts with the negotiation from the very onset. It's the first conversations where you anchor ideas, where you anchor numbers. That is building the relationship. And it's all about a trusted relationship. So the negotiation starts before the negotiation starts because it's all about people. The negotiation doesn't end when the contract is signed. It continues on. And Carnegie Mellon does a lot of negotiation with their PhD program. And I remember reading Linda Babcock's book about the differences in negotiation between men and women. And they talked about that in their PhD program, they had people go to every place that you could possibly negotiate, whether it's at the grocery store, just asking for a little bit more than what was advertised, in the deli, asking for an additional side. And they would challenge their students to do this every semester. And the only place that they couldn't get more than what was advertised was at the gas station. And that's just a transactional thing. The way you pump gas, it's very finite, but that was the only place. And that's because there's not a long-term relationship. And even when you think about going to a store and all those things, it's about that relationship. It's about two people. The gas station, it's between you and a mechanical thing for the most part. The only other place would be when you buy a car or selling a house. Those are the times where you don't really care about the outcome of the other party. But otherwise, it's all about the relationship. So you need to be really thoughtful about that. And I pulled some research. Harvard looked at long-term partnerships and found a 37% higher success rate in follow-up for deals and collaborations. So they were able to focus on the relationship and that built a longer term connection. And they say people are more likely to do a deal, even if it's more money with somebody they know, like, and trust than any other factor. So it's not about the bottom line always. It's really about the relationship. Trust and social capital in long-term business is what is really focusing on that post deal relationship. And it increases that trust and that loyalty. It's not about just getting the deal done. It's about what are you building together? It's such a great frame because it allows those things that get in our way, the apprehension, what if they say no, that game going back and forth. If we broaden our view and look at it from the long-term gain, then we're more able to pick the words that we need to really show that collaboration. We consider the interests of the other party, not just when they're at the table, but what are their interests moving forward? That gives us more of a language, that gives us more leverage to pull from to say, well, this is really an important factor. I don't think you should focus so much on this. Let's look at it more broadly. Longer term, this is what's important to you. So when you consider the other side, zoom out and see you both in the picture, you are able to allow yourself to pull from some things that could be important to the other side and really be thoughtful about putting together a deal that is going to work for you, but also for the other party. It's not about an equal win-win, but it's about making everybody feel like they got what they needed. I'll share some context to this and get you to think about what do you need to stop doing if you're looking at it in a finite way instead of at a zoomed out abundance way. So stay right where you are. It's me. Thought I'd tell you how excited I am about this collection of courses I have available. It's all around the concept of adopting a negotiator mindset. And the only way to do that is to really understand what it's like to be a negotiator so that you can practice it in your everyday. I'm excited about this project because it's going to allow people to do this on their own time and go through the course at their own pace. If you want to learn more, go to SusieTomanchuk.com. I'd love for you to check it out. A negotiator mindset is so key to approaching anything that's high stakes. So many things come to mind, so many stories that I have experienced myself. Luckily, not being that person always that looked at it only from getting the deal done perspective. But I remember negotiating with Bill was our CEO at the time, and he would do deals with our vendors, and then he would go out of the picture. And he was really great about understanding everybody's costs of our costs and their costs. And he just knew so much about the technology, how they were going to operate it. He knew so much that he was able to use a lot of that to really manipulate the deal and get under their cost because he would use just different outrageous things. Like you would talk about the long-term relationship that they would gain by doing this one deal, which was kind of fictitious, to be honest, not the best way of doing it, but he would just look at what it took, whatever it took to get the deal done. And being somebody that was responsible to my group, my team had to make sure that that customer was happy was really difficult because I saw even the people that weren't at the table knew that the company, it wasn't a great deal for them and they had to live with it. They had to live with the expenses that they had. They had to be really, really careful on, and they had to watch every penny. And so they were paralyzed by this short-term view of doing a negotiation and not thinking about the long-term relationship. And so they were not happy working with us. When the contract was up, they left as fast as they could. It was such a short-sighted view. And I lived through so many people that negotiated a deal. In fact, the business started seeing that was a pattern because the salespeople were being incented to just get the deal done, get it signed out of the dotted line and just throw it over the fence. And so finally, the operations people, the engineering and the business people like me that had to live with it got the ear of management and said, this doesn't work. And so what happened was then they made it so that you not only did the deal, but then you had to live with the deal that you did. And that really taught me that there's so much power in really seeing it from a bigger view, a broader view. When I would go to the negotiation table and talk to the person on the other side, I could tell them, I know this doesn't seem important to you to spend the money on this piece, but it is, and I'll tell you why. I've seen success, and here's the broader picture. It allowed me to set the scene in a way that really illustrated to the other side the importance of why they need to make decisions right now that would affect in a positive way their future teams and everything. So I saw that so often. I also see as I coach people, when people have to have a difficult conversation with somebody that works for them, they often focus on that very set appointment that they have to have that difficult, quote unquote, conversation. So often there's been more than one thing that they have to point to. So over time, it's like they've been living with this person that is not meeting expectations. And so it's been this kind of like this shadow over them that they have to have this difficult conversation. So they get so focused on that conversation and that looking at it from a finite perspective that when I talk to them and coach them through it, when they look at it and broaden it, yes, it's going to be a difficult conversation when you go in, but it doesn't end there. You want them to be successful as they move forward. So you have to do that whole thing of zooming out and helping them see the future. So instead of only focusing on, you did this wrong, this is what I observed, this is what's wrong, you say, you're not meeting expectations. Let's look toward the future. Tell me what you see. What are you going to do different? And that shows that investment in that person. It doesn't stop at the conversation. It's not a one and done, and then you just turn the page. When you think about it more broadly and really consider the relationship after the conversation, it gives you more liberation to have a broader conversation. And when we look at it like that, it allows us a lot less anxiety. It allows us to zoom it out so we can zoom it out for the other person. So when I think about what to stop doing, I think about stop assuming that it's this one time. Don't look at a negotiation as signing a contract, getting the deal. A difficult conversation is it's an event that I have to do and everything's going to change after them. In leadership, you're with that person to make sure their success is long term. So it's not a one and done. In a negotiation, whether you're asking for a new role and you're negotiating a new role, you still have to live with the people that are going to give that to you. I'm not saying that you don't put your interests in mind, but when you consider what's important to them and the longevity of the relationship, it gives you more context to get what you want, to give your context to why it's important to pay you more. And to use as an example, you can help them see the future state. That can help them get to a yes because they aren't just looking at what you're asking for now. They can see the application of it moving forward. You can give them more context when you look beyond that contract, that conversation, that one transaction. The relationship's everything. Unless you're buying a car or a house, there's very few times when the relationship is not paramount to a negotiation. So I want you to stop thinking about a situation in just that transaction. Just let that go. Start broadening your view, zoom out and see it as a bigger thing. That will enable you to find some creativity, some ideas, some points of leverage that you can use that you'll understand that they may use. So broaden it and understand that it is all about the relationship. I'll give you some tips that you can start doing when we come back. Hey, Susie here. Thought I'd pop in. I wanted to let you know I've been an executive coach for over a decade. I work with executives and they call me their silent partner because I help them increase their confidence when they're facing really difficult decisions. If you'd like to see if we're a good fit, head over to susietalmanchuck.com and fill out an application. I'd love to hear from you. Let's jump into some tips that you can consider. So the first one is to zoom out. Think about the negotiation as a broader conversation. View it not just in that conversation, signing the bottom line. How is the relationship going to look? That will help you in the moment to identify that visual that you want them to see. It'll get you to assign your value higher because you can show and illustrate through your experience how the future state will look. So zooming out and making sure that you're not just focused on that situation. When it's high stakes, we're just looking at this one thing. In a negotiation for more salary, we think about the number. Is this number the right number? But there's so many other factors to it. It's the 401k that comes with it. It's other development incentives. It's the boss that you're working for. There's a lot of other things to look at that goes beyond that one factor. When you're focused on that one factor, when other things are introduced, you'll be surprised. And you're not able to really illustrate the point if you're only looking at it from that situation that's important to you. It allows you to see it broader. So that's the first thing, is really seeing it from a zoomed out perspective and not just that occasion, especially when it's high stakes. We just want to get it done and get out. You need to look at it broader. The second one is to follow up with great value. And whether it's you got the job and you want to reiterate that, don't just send a thank you note, tell them about enjoying the process, what you learned, how you're going to invest. People, when they make a deal, even if they're like, oh, I gave them more than I wanted to, having that kind of follow-up will make them feel better as well. So do something above and beyond. If it's a new deal and now if you have a new customer, really spend time thinking about, how do I touch base with them, let them know I have their back, and make sure that you're continuing that trusted relationship. If it's a difficult conversation, don't be afraid to circle back and say, we had that conversation a week ago. How is it going for you? What have you noticed? What have you shifted? Tell me more. And if you've observed something different, make sure you come back. You want to have those regular touch points, because then you're continuing to build that trust. You're building that relationship, and it makes those next conversations, whether it's you need to adjust the contract, there has been a little bit of a flub in terms of somebody's role and their responsibilities and living up to that. It makes it easier when you continue to invest in that relationship. And then the last one is to be a connector. How can you show that you're not just invested in them in this situation, but how can you make them better by, whether it's your employee and somebody else that might be a great mentor to them? How do you show additional investment in them? Whether it's the deal and the new client that you have, take a few moments to think about who else would benefit in knowing them or for them to know. How can you be a connector and provide additional value to that person? Just going through the motions of doing that really shows and illustrates that you're thinking beyond yourself, which goes a long way for other people. So think about what you're going to start doing. Where do you limit yourself in terms of these high stakes conversations, high stakes negotiations that you face, in not zooming out and looking at the relationship, considering the longer term effects? So the tips that I gave you was making that zoom out, see it from more than just that finite time. Do you need to do that more? Thinking about it more broadly, especially when it's high stakes. We want to just get in and get out. We don't want to take the time to prepare, but just having that perspective can allow you to be more creative in the moment. The second one is, what do you do after that quote unquote deal is done? What are those touch points? What are those follow-up things? And this can look like putting something on your calendar to remind yourself to reach out to that person, to follow up on whatever that deal was, to make sure you show them. Then the third thing is, how do you leverage your network or your connections or your experience to help that person or that company? How can you show a proactive approach in giving them more insights or investment or connection that can help them personally or with their business, within their business? So some tips for you to consider of what you're going to start to do. It's important to listen and understand this conceptually, but it's another thing to really put it in action. I want to challenge you to take on a different view, a different perspective as you are adopting a negotiator mindset, to zoom out in a way that you can look at this differently and understand that it is about the relationship and not just the transaction. Hi, Susie here. One of the things that I love is I facilitate team conversations, whether it's talking about high stakes, how to advocate for one another. So if you're a leader and you want to bring your team together, you want to level them up, help them really bond together and increase their confidence as a whole, contact me. Go to SusieTomaczuk.com, tell me a little bit about your team, and I'll be in touch. I think I made my point. It's about the relationship. It is. It truly is. A negotiation is about two people getting together. That's why it is so challenging sometimes because we never know how it's going to go. Every deal is a different conversation because it involves different people. The deal points are a little bit different. The circumstances are always changing. We have our view of it and we know, and we always assume that that's just the view. We don't think about how the other person views it, but it's all very different. And that's what makes negotiation really challenging because it's a work in progress. It's something that you have to prepare for and allow yourself to prepare in a way that you can zoom out and see it from a lot of different angles so that in the moment when you're having the conversation, you don't retreat, you don't soften your position, you stay in it and you really listen to understand because that's what's important is making both parties really feel that they were heard and that they don't just walk away with nothing. Gone are the days of a win-lose. That is just not the way negotiations go. And win-win is also not the right label for a negotiation, but it's okay to say everybody feels like they got something. And could you get more than the other person and feel better about the negotiation? Absolutely. But you don't want to do that at the expense of making the other person feel like you took advantage of them. That is what creates a negative perception of negotiation, that manipulation piece. And when you think about it as the relationship, you do consider the interests of the other party. I know I say it a lot, but when I went to the Harvard course around negotiation and leadership, they said they've seen it time and time again that if you consider the interests of the other party, even for 30 seconds, the group that they have do that, even in made up scenarios, increase the outcomes measurably by just taking that consideration. And to me, that is all about focusing on the relationship. It's seeing it from a broader view. It's allowing you to see, not just zoom into what's important to you, but zoom out to what's important to the other side as well, because it'll give you the ability. And when you are creative and you show that you're going to give up, that rule of reciprocity is true, that allows the other person to feel that connection, that give and take. That's a real aspect of negotiation, is to make the other person feel also objective so that they can also be creative and think outside the box. That's really the key. So challenge yourself. What are you going to start doing? How are you going to look at it differently so you really understand in every circumstance it's about the long game and not that interaction? I'm so glad you made the commitment to be here. Run over to negotiationlove.com. I guess click on over to negotiationlove.com. I'm going to start to add to the what I talk about here in my newsletter. That'll be coming out next week. So don't miss it as I talk about that relationship in negotiation and how important it is and paramount to having a great outcome for both parties. So it's go to negotiationlove.com, join the newsletter. I'd love to see you there. And until next time, remember that negotiation is more than a skill, it's a mindset. I appreciate you.